All right, we are live. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Open Source Live, a quarterly conversation about libraries and open source. So in January, we had our first Open Source Live, and we heard from public, academic, and special libraries on how they overcame pandemic challenges. My name is Cal, by the way. I'm Partner Engagement Specialist at Bywater Solutions. I'm here with my co-host, Jessie, and she'll help me keep an eye on the chat today so we can answer any questions that you may have.
Hi, everyone. Glad to see you here.
So just before we begin and introduce our special guests, we wanted to talk about an exciting thing that we just announced yesterday. It's a partnership with Bywater Solutions and COA US, and it's a fundraiser for the COA community and COA US. So it's called the Spring into Fitness Challenge, and we're just asking that throughout the month of May that you get moving with us and the rest of the open source community and track your miles, track your minutes, maybe sign up with your coworkers or challenge another library branch to a friendly competition. And you can get those minutes and miles doing anything that you like. So you can swim or do yoga or run or walk. We just thought it would be a great way for everyone to come together, and all the proceeds go to COA US. So we'll drop the link into the channel, and then we just hope that you guys join us and that you sign up and share with us like how you're moving in May. So today, we're very grateful to be joined with two special guests. We have James Mitchell of the University of North Alabama Collier Library, and also Robert Wilson of Middle Tennessee State Library. It's the James E. Walker Library.
That's right.
So they're here to speak to you about their guide that they're publishing on open source library systems, and also getting involved in a ALA special interest group. So again, feel free if you have any questions, we'll be monitoring the chat box. But other than that, take it away, guys.
Sure, yeah. First off, thanks for having us here. We're really excited about this guide and reinvigorating the old LITA open source systems group with the core open source systems IG. And it's always a pleasure talking about open source in libraries with fellow open source advocates. A little background on James and I. James and I met at a state user group meeting for an iOS. I won't name here, but these meetings seem more like therapy sessions than anything else. James and I are both really new to that particular iOS and hit it off immediately in airing our grievances. The iOS I was using before that system was Koha, and I honestly couldn't believe how much more expensive the proprietary system was without many of the features Koha had. It honestly felt a little criminal. So, and the only explanation, I think we kind of both talked about this, the only explanation was most library personnel just have no idea about some of the open source options out there. They might not care, which is fine, but at minimum, you think library administrators would care when it came to costs. So I think some of the inspiration for this guide came from that and those experiences. This guide we put together is an attempt to provide a full overview of library open source information systems with a chapter dedicated to each type, whether it's ILSs or e-resource management or discovery layers or resource sharing or institutional repositories and digital asset management systems, as well as chapters that provide historical overviews of open source in libraries. And each chapter kind of starts with an overview of the history of that type of system and its evolution. We also cover each system's community and have profiles on service providers and vendors for hosting, development, and support services. And we speculate a little where we can on the future outlook of those systems. We really hope it allows libraries to be informed about their open source options when they're looking to implement any of these types of systems. Outside of exasperation with certain proprietary vendors, inspiration for this also came from our experiences at different libraries with administrators and some colleagues having what we felt were outdated views on open source. So, and I think part of that was when we were looking at resources for this project, a lot of the activity was in the late 2000s, early 2010s, and not really a whole lot else since. So we thought an update was overdue and a different approach or treatment of the subject would be nice. Like I said, a guide that would cover each system, the community, the service providers and vendors, providing support and hosting for those services. A guide for the average library, rather, I guess, than an article talking about what an R1 or ARL was developing. Sounded like a plan, and something that hopefully wasn't too technical or too dry. So we also, just to caveat, we do talk about Folio, so we're still kind of talking about what R1s are doing, but it's not all bad. Bywater is involved, for example. Tons of smaller schools are now live or about to be with Folio. So the Folio landscape is definitely becoming more accessible too, and I think we cover that well. I think the main audience for the guide, and James, correct me if there's anything to add, but I think the main audience is probably library administrators, but also recent MLS grads and students, as well as tech folks new to libraries. Like I mentioned earlier, for those of us working in smaller libraries or perhaps like more conservative libraries on risk assessment side of things, there are a lot of like misconceptions about open source still. Many folks still seem to think, open source is risky and that you need technical expertise in-house. That can be true for some systems, of course, but for many of the options and almost all the options we cover in this guide, that's not the case. And we really hope this guide communicates that, I think, more than anything. As librarians, James and I both ardently believe in many of the values open source software represents. And I think most librarians and anyone working in the space do. But I think we did a good job of balancing the values of open source with the practicality of open source and the cost savings of open source that many of the options bring to the table. This might not be news to this audience, but we're hopeful it will serve as like an update or primer to the world of open source library systems for those that need to see it most. And a disclaimer too, Bywater is featured in many of these chapters of this guide because of their role in the area and so many of the areas now that we cover. So I think it also conveys how mature the support and hosting environment for these systems has become as well.
Thank you, Robert, for covering the guide, the upcoming guide. We're still not exactly sure the date when that will be released. We have seen it in the catalogs as early as May. I don't think it will be that soon, but it is currently in production, so it should be out in the next few months. It's now officially kind of out of our hands and making its way through. So hopefully it will be available soon, and hopefully it will be an asset to people who are interested in learning more about open source library systems. So Robert talked about the guide, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the Open Source Systems Interest Group. I'm going to try to provide a little bit of context and background just very briefly. This interest group isn't a completely new group. It actually is a transition from the previous LITA interest group called, I think it was also called might have just been called Open Source. At the end of last year, 2020, Director of Advocacy, Connections and Engagement for CORE sent a message to the LITA open source mailing list mentioning that all of the old LITA mailing lists would be shut down and interest groups would be transitioning to the new ALA Connect site. So there was a question of, do we want to see this interest group continue? And if so, does anybody want to chair or co-chair the interest group? So I saw that message and I stewed over it for a few minutes thinking about it. I wanted to see the interest group continue, although over the past 2 or 3 years that I had been a part of that mailing list, I hadn't seen much activity. So I was anxious to volunteer, hopefully with the interest of revitalizing it, and hopefully kind of for it to serve as a community for those who are interested in no particular open source system in general, but who are interested in open source systems for libraries. So I sent an email to Jenny volunteering to serve as co-chair, and that was that. And then, of course, Robert volunteered as well, because fresh on our minds, we're thinking about open source library systems day in and day out for the past year and a half. So naturally, he was a perfect co-chair for that. So we started working with this interest group at the beginning of this year, trying to plan and develop it more. And that comes to the purpose. Originally, the charge of the open source interest group when it was with LITA was a little bit more development focused. I believe the first line of the charge was talking about the development, maintenance of software, basically code development. And Robert and I had a discussion about really whether we saw the interest group serving as a location for that, and maybe better, whether it was better for it to really be a general purpose interest group for anybody who just wants to learn more, maybe an educational purpose, but also an advocacy purpose, because again, I think as Robert so well articulated, at least it's my impression, I think it's his impression as well, we think there's still quite a bit of maybe outdated perspectives on open source, and we wanted this to be a forum for us to kind of advocate for maybe a better understanding of the current state of open source library systems. So our focus is slightly different. We don't have as much of a focus on or an interest in that being a forum for talking about code bases for different projects. There are all sorts of, those individual communities have those kind of things in place most of the time. And so it didn't really make sense, I guess, for us to kind of be doing that. What we did think is this would be the perfect place for people who had a general interest in open source systems to kind of come together to learn, to talk about open source library systems and learn more about them and share that, that interest with one another. And so with that, the Open Source Systems Interest Group with CORE was born. Let me move back here. The community, one really important thing to know about this, you don't have to be an ALA member, and you don't have to be a CORE member to be a part of this interest group. That's really important. That's one of the things we want to make clear from the get-go. I know that before, it's not easy to be a part of an interest group because you had to pay the dues to be an ALA member, and then you had to pay the dues to be a member of LITA, and on top of that, so there were dues upon dues, and it made it, it minimized maybe the community involvement. So one of the great changes, I think, is that with this new interest group, there's no requirement for ALA membership or CORE membership. All you have to do is create an ALA account, which doesn't cost anything. So wanted to make that clear. Events, as it stands right now, Robert and I are currently planning the virtual interest group week in the last week of July, and I'll do more details on that in just a second. But right now, we're currently just planning virtual events, and I think Robert and I have an interest in hosting virtual events that are a little bit more open to the public, maybe not necessarily hosting events that are take place during a given conference week or anything, because maybe not everybody goes to those conferences. So I think our focus, at least in the future, we're going to try to make it as inclusive as possible for people to be able to participate. And virtual is a great way for people to do that. So really quickly, I know I mentioned that it's free to join, but you may be wondering, how do I actually join this interest group? I've ran down a list of the bullet points of what exactly you need to do. All you really need to do is go to, I have a shortened URL here, but you can also just go to the ALA site and attempt to sign in. If you don't have an account, you can say there's a link for don't have an account, create one here, and you can click that there. So if you don't have an account, you can create one. If you have an ALA account, that's great. You can just go ahead and navigate to the interest group homepage, or to go to ALA Connect and search for our interest group, Open Source Systems Interest Group. And you can just log in using your ALA account. And then once you've logged in and you're on our site, our interest group site, there will be a button that says Join Community in the left corner of the community page, and you click that. And as simple as that, you're a part of the community. You can actually follow discussion threads, see announcements, and send messages via the community site. So that's one thing you can do. Or if you're a fan of communicating via email and you like to see things via the email list, you prefer to just send an email, you can use the email here below. Of course, as you join the community, you'll see how to do all of these things. But at least wanted to make it clear for anybody maybe who's listening, who's interested in joining now as we're speaking, these are the steps you can go through. I also can share this PowerPoint and it can be distributed. I'm not sure what communication channels that would be available, but I'm happy to share that for anyone who'd like to join and maybe isn't able to write down and take notes right now. So last thing really is that July 27th, that's the specific date, from 1 to 2 p.m., that's Central Time, we will be having our first Open Source Systems Interest Group virtual event. Tentatively, the topic is going to be about Folio implementation from a library perspective with different service providers. So that's one of the things we're just wanting to know, to share maybe people's experiences with who've implemented Folio and the different service providers, and maybe how implementation has gone on their end. And that's pretty much it. I don't have anything else to share unless Robert has something he'd like to say. The main thing I would like to say is I would like to thank Cal and Jesse for allowing us the opportunity to speak and to share this message. It's not always easy finding avenues to share these changes, and I'm just thankful that we got a chance to speak. So thank you.
Definitely. And we'll be sure to include your PowerPoint and your links. We'll make the recording available afterwards, and we'll be sending it out through, social media and things like that. So we'll make sure that everyone has access to the event and signing up for the group. Jesse, were there any questions in the YouTube channel that you can see?
Nope. No questions yet, but I did share the link. I found it and sent the link into chat so people can sign up.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It's really fabulous. We definitely agree here at Bywater that there's just so many misconceptions about open source. So we appreciate you, taking on some of this misinformation campaigning, I guess. So we're really excited to read your guide too. So please definitely send us the link when it becomes available. I'm sure we'd love to all read it. So now we're going to hear updates from the rest of our open source community. So we have Nick here from Bywater to talk updates of Koha.
Hi. Hi, everybody. So Koha, the big thing right now is that we've got the upcoming release for 2111. I always have to think about the dates. That's the November 2021 release. So we're releasing 2105. 2105 is the May release. That's wrapping up right now. Within the community, there is a lot of great stuff that has gotten into that release. A lot of new features around acquisitions, a lot of speeding up things, a lot of adding to the REST API and building that stuff out. During this, I was trying to find the link, and I don't have it on me right now, but also the Koha community is working on a cookbook. So they're asking for recipes from anyone involved in the community, which should be everyone, I hope. If you have one out there, just look it up. It should be on the Koha sites, and we'll get you that link out and some other stuff. Koha-wise for Bywater, we just finished a major upgrade or a major infrastructure upgrade and upgrades of everyone to Koha 2005. So many numbers that are all the same. So that has been going great, and we're now back on our regular schedule. We are pushing out our PS upgrades with bug fixes for everyone, so everything's going well. That's what I've got.
Awesome, thanks. I think Kyle's going to add on a little bit about some bug fixes and also talk maybe a little bit about libkey.
Yeah, really, I don't need to mention any specific bug fixes, but we have been submitting a lot of bug fix enhancements to Koha. So I just wanted to mention that bug fixes are always really good. As far as libkey goes, there hasn't been much of a change since the last time I spoke about it. We are still doing a heavy push on print management. The one good piece of news is that it looks like we will be able to accomplish the JAMX integration with libkey, which also means that there's a possibility of integrating Koha with JAMX in the future. I know that there have been some people in the community asking about that once they heard I was working on that. So I am very excited about that. It's something that I have been banging my head on for a couple months, and we got it up the chain at the JAMX Corporation and found out that everything I've been doing was correct, and that they added hardware level verification to their code so that the emulator they gave us doesn't work anymore. So they're actually shipping me some JAMX hardware. So it's just a fun and painful story all at once. So that's all I've got for now.
Good job, Kyle. I know it takes like a lot of persistence to keep up with that. So. All right, thank you guys. And then, so one of our fastest growing areas here at Bywater is the Aspen discovery layer. And we have Addie here from the implementation team to discuss some news and updates.
Thanks. Yeah, so since the last time we talked on the last Open Source Live, Aspen Discovery has seen 3 releases with one more coming tonight, actually. So with all of those releases, we've improved our connection to Overdrive. We've improved connections to CarlX and Symfony, those integrations. We also have Overdrive previews in Aspen now, which is really cool. So if you're going through the catalog, you can preview audiobooks and ebooks right in Aspen. We've done lots of updates to our grouping records. So the way that we group our titles together in those beautiful titles where we see all the formats, we've improved the way we're doing that based off of partner suggestions. You can now see if an item's checked out or on hold. So if you're logged in and you're doing searches in the catalog, it'll let you know if you have that item currently, which is really nice. And for tonight, the exciting thing is that we will now have a Polaris integration after tonight's release. So we will be able to connect to Polaris as well as Koha, obviously, CarlX, Sierra, Symfony, and Horizon. And since the last time we chatted, we've added 4 more library systems with 54 branches. And by the end of July, we're going to have 10 more systems with 142 branches. So we are growing super fast. As far as like upcoming events and stuff, we have a webinar coming up, an Aspen Discovery 101 webinar. We also have a consortium webinar coming up. So I think Jesse and Cal can put those links in the chat. And then we also are always pushing out lots of information and documentation through our Aspen Weekly publication. And I'm running out of breath. We always have our Aspen gatherings every month. We just have so many updates for y'all. So we have Aspen gatherings every month where we can all chat in the community, and you can let us know, you know, what you would like to see in Aspen. So we can also send out the links for all of that information as well. So we're really busy in the Aspen world. But yeah, that's all my updates for today.
Thanks, Addie. Really appreciate it. And now we have Jesse to give an update on Coral, our open source ERM that we support.
Hey everyone. Well, we have two big announcements for Coral ERM. The first is Notre Dame has officially gone live on the Coral community version. They were the first developers for Coral and stayed on that code when releasing it to the community. So Bywater Solutions, we just worked with them to bring them up on the community code. So welcome to Notre Dame, to the Coral community. That was pretty awesome. One of the biggest enhancements for Coral in the past release that came out at the end of 2020 is the update for Counter 5 reports. So prior releases only worked up to Counter 4. So for any of you doing usage statistics updates for any of your electronic resources, anything past Counter 5 wouldn't work. So in the 2020-09 release, we saw an update with Counter 5. So now you can do both uploads in TSV files and connect any of your Sushi compliant vendors directly to the usage statistics module and update those Counter 5s. So it's a really great enhancement, and we're excited to see the Coral community is still thriving and growing.
Thanks, Jesse. Okay, so the final update we have is for Folio, but Ian couldn't be here today. So I'm going to share a video that he recorded, and so we're going to try to do this. Let's see. Share my screen. Can you see Ian's face? Okay.
Hi, I'm Ian, Bywater Solutions, Folio Lead, Implementation Lead, and this is an update of what's going on in Folio. So first off, the community is currently hard at work on the Iris release. We're undergoing something called Bugfest, which is the rigorous test procedure that comes before every major release. This release is going to include a lot of really good stuff, including inventory tags, improved user search filtering, and overall performance updates. So Iris is scheduled for May 3rd, and that's right around the corner. In other release news, the community is also gathering feedback from implemented and soon to be implemented libraries on what features are most important for the upcoming Kiwi release, which is scheduled for along about American Thanksgiving, end of November. They're using a new pointing process, which gives each institution 100 points to allocate towards features, or like spending coins on what they think is the most important stuff for the end of this year. Then we aggregate all the points, and that is where development resources will then be allocated by the capacity planning team. That process is underway and should be wrapped up by the end of April. Lastly, the Folio project has officially adopted their new governance model, and with it has led to the instantiation of the Community Council, which sits alongside the Product Council and the Technical Council. The Community Council, its job is, whereas the Product Council had been centered around defining what Folio is, and the Technical Council is more like, how is Folio doing what it does? The Community Council is more centered around how the project relates to the library community in general, to the open source community in general. It's also responsible for the governance of the overall Folio model. There they run the elections and keep the whole project to be organized, spinning off SIGs and special interest groups and task forces and those kind of things for whatever it's needed for. They are also in the process of looking for grant funding to help to aid in Folio's overall development. So that group is there. As with all council meetings, these meetings are open. So when Community Council announces its first official meeting, everyone is welcome to join. Seats on councils are currently restricted to Folio project members, but anybody can become, any institution can become a member. You just go to the wiki and there's details on how to sign up. So if you're interested in running for one of the council seats in the future, that's the first step. And then next time there are elections, toss your name in the hat, and maybe you too can serve on one of Folio's councils. I do believe that is it for the updates this time around. We're looking for a lot of libraries going live this summer. It should be a very busy time in Folio land. And I hope to have more updates for you soon.
Thanks, Virtual Ian. We appreciate it. All right. Does anyone have anything else or any other questions or comments?
I just want to say, if you are looking for a way to get up and active, I'm going to push Koha Community's Spring Into Fitness Challenge. It's open to anyone in the open source community. It's just a great way to be a part. Like Cal said, you can walk, run, jog, swim, hike, bike, yoga, dance, dance, whatever you want to do, and share pictures and just motivate each other to get up and be active. So the URL is in the chat box, and if you are ambitious, come and join us.
All right. Well, thanks again for everyone who joined us today. Robert and James, we really appreciated you guys being here. We'll make sure that this recording and all your links are available after this, and we'll see you in 3 months for the next Open Source Live. Have a good day.
Thanks, Cal.
Bye.